Welcome to another episode of the PayDestiny podcast. If you have career goals that include getting a promotion, getting a pay raise, and making the most out of any job offer, then you'll love today's guest, who is growing a thriving IP law firm after leaving the firm that she was at, where she experienced discrimination. She left the firm, settled, won her settlement, and took less in her settlement so she could tell her story and share with other women so we can learn from her experiences. I'm Adriana Herrera, the PayDestiny podcast host and founder of PayDestiny, personal software to help women and underrepresented professionals access tools to build skills and confidence to get that promotion, get that pay raise, and reach career goals. Let me tell you more about today's guest, Sheila Gibson. Sheila is the founder of Aura IP Law, an intellectual property IP law firm focused on the IP needs of entities specializing in cannabis, life sciences, medical devices, cosmetics, food, beverage, and sports and retail innovation. Prior to law school, Sheila studied microbiology and molecular genetics and worked in biotech industry manufacturing gene therapeutics in a GMP facility. After law school, she began her career in intellectual property IP law at a nationally recognized IP boutique firm and practiced at several top-tier law firms and started her own firm. She has counseled clients at every stage of their growth, from startup to large to publicly traded companies, and advises her cannabis clients in all aspects of IP, including patents, trademarks, copyrights, branding, licensing, IP transactions, IP agreements, opinion work, due diligence, and more. Please help me welcome Sheila Gibson to the PayDestiny podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, Sheila. I'm so excited to have you to be able to impart some of your knowledge, wisdom, and experiences with our audience. Looking at the podcast and the promotions and pay raise and job offer negotiation topics that we'll get into, will you be answering the questions from the lens of an employer, an employee, or perhaps both?
I think I can answer both. And primarily because one of my top tips for any employee is to have an employer-owner mentality. I think that is a true secret to success. And so in a lot of ways, they're the same.
Got it. So keep that in mind as we go through these questions, that's where her lens is coming from. So Sheila, I really want to dive right in to some of the things that we had spoken about before with your career and experiences. You now have a thriving, growing law firm where you are hiring new attorneys and support to help you service your clients. And this came about how? Can you tell me a little bit like what the motivation was or what pushed you to actually start the firm?
Definitely. So, I had to, and in a lot of ways they're intertwined, but, one is that I was very, very unhappy in my career. And I had been for several years. I had been being mistreated by a law firm. And what I described in kind of settlement negotiations was just pervasive, just little attacks. So there was nothing overt. There wasn't anything super scandalous, but it was just ongoing. And I think now they call them microaggressions. And it was constant. And it was, I can't think of any single year that, there weren't at least several things that happened. And being told, a lot of different things. I was told that I was being too sensitive. I was reading between the lines. I was told that, if I wasn't happy, then they would put me in an administrative role. And then I wasn't even put in an administrative role, in terms of helping to administer ongoings at the firm. And, along with that, I wasn't getting the same business development opportunities as many of the men were. I wasn't getting any business development opportunities, but then at the same time was getting constantly harassed, not quite harassed. I don't want to use strong language, but, just always on my case about my hours, about not being able to keep up, and but then also not getting any of the support. So from there, it was kind of continuing on. I was a single mom, didn't really have a choice. I worked very hard for this career. I was making a lot of money. It wasn't going to be an easy thing to just start over and do something else. And so, I really felt trapped, and I stayed as long as I could until it really came to a head. And when it really came to a head was when I started to develop a real keen interest in cannabis law. Yeah. And I really wanted to be involved in cannabis law. I didn't quite see how, but I knew that I wanted to. And then over the years, it became apparent that I really could apply my skill set, IP, to cannabis. And I did a lot of things to really make that happen, one of which was taking another bar exam, because California doesn't have reciprocity. So this is another way that I also felt trapped. So California attorneys, the California bar doesn't have any reciprocity. So they don't allow any lawyers from other states to practice in California. And in turn, the other states don't allow California lawyers to practice in their states. But about more than half, probably about 35 states are what's called universal bar exam states. And they will waive applicants from other states in based on their UBE scores. So in 2017, I took a UBE bar exam in Alaska and passed it. And when I approached the firm and told them what I had done, and I had done this because cannabis is state by state specific, and in order to file trademark protection, we file both federal and state. And I can only file in California currently, and I wanted the ability to file in other states. And when I explained to the firm what I had done and why I had done it, I got zero support. Not only would they not pay for it or reimburse me for any of my expenses, they really didn't even announce. So when they announced all the other bar applicants who had passed the bar exam, didn't announce my name. And the messaging was very clear. So in about 2019, things were going just worse. It just got progressively worse. And I because I became more vocal. And the more vocal I became about the situation that I was seeing, the more I was labeled as difficult, the more I was just ignored, the more I was, tension just got worse until my business partner decided that he was going to leave the firm. Yeah. And I, was just so ready for something different. And he had different goals and different ways that he wanted to practice than I did. And so I wasn't quite ready to go with him. So I thought I would make it one more year at the firm and then move on. But after he left, it was really interesting. They didn't talk to me. And for a solid week or two, didn't say a word to me, didn't ask me where I was going, what I was doing. Was I going to stay? I was hoping to stay because I wasn't ready to go. I wasn't, I didn't have a plan. And then the next thing that happened is they decided to cut my salary, just arbitrarily, without any regard for whether I was keeping any of the business, whether it was all going with my business partner. And it was a huge pay cut. It was, over, 25% cut in my salary. Wow. And at that point, I let them know that the way that I saw things, that, over the history of my time here, there has been a very clear pattern of gender discrimination and gender bias. And I laid out all of the ways and all of the things, and, there were many, and again, none of them huge, but numerous. And they disagreed with me. And, we got into a very tense and heated argument. And I remember it was a Friday afternoon, and I ended the conversation. I said, I don't think this conversation is productive anymore. I think we should each walk away, have another conversation on Monday after you've had time to think about what I'm saying to you, because I don't feel like you're hearing what I'm saying. So we agreed to do that. Monday came around, and it was as if the conversation never happened. They wanted me to accept the cut in salary and sign a new agreement. I told them I couldn't do that until we addressed the issues that I raised. They told me they would, absolutely address them all, fly out to California and sit down with me personally and make sure they were all addressed. And I said, well, let's schedule that. And they said, not unless you sign the agreement. And I said, well, I'm not signing the agreement unless we address the concerns I have.
Right.
And so then they said, well, then I'm going to recommend to the board that you be terminated. And at that point, I, just said, okay, and hung up the phone. And by the end of the week, I had my termination notice and 30 days notice that my employment there was ending. And the other part of that was the cannabis. We didn't see eye to eye on the cannabis either. They weren't really ready to have cannabis clients. They weren't supportive of anything that I wanted to do in the cannabis space. They were, and they're all sort of the same, questioning, well, we don't see these as legitimate business opportunities. We don't see these as legitimate business development expenses. If I wanted to go to a cannabis conference,
only $1 billion industry,
right?
Right.
And it's a little bit like Office Space. I had to ask my 6 bosses if I could spend, meanwhile, other people at the firm seemingly had the firm credit card and could do whatever they wanted. So, in the end, it was a really scary time. My kids were still in middle school, and, I didn't know what I was going to do, how I was going to do it, but at the same time, I also knew I had to stand my ground. Mm-hmm. So I don't even remember where we started, what the question was, but that was,
this is exactly, what I wanted to hear and learn from just your experiences working at the firm and starting your own firm. Like, what got you to start your own firm? And it was, how long were you at the firm that you're speaking of?
That one, I was there 5 years, but I had been at 3 other firms and over the span of 16 years. And, this one was just, actually, no, what's interesting is I'm a patent lawyer. And in patent law, it's probably no secret because you have to have a STEM background. So you're talking already about there are fewer women in patent law in general. So my first firm, I was the 4th woman attorney in a 40 attorney office. My second firm, kind of the same type of numbers. By my last firm, when I left, I was the only female IP attorney. So, it's always been a very male dominated space. And then it's also, not to stereotype, but I think there is some truth to, I think generally people who gravitate toward tech are probably a little bit different on the social spectrum. And so you have different personalities that you're working with. And I'm working with a lot of engineering types and a lot of, so I'm just working with a lot of people who really didn't seem to understand at all, or really even care what it's like to be a woman in corporate America.
Right.
And it's very different. And what's interesting is, I'm also Mexican. And so I was in at least a couple of the firms, I was on the diversity committee. And it was almost laughable. It was like, so do we have a diversity committee for a purpose, or is this just a box we're checking for some of our clients? Because, some of the things, and I'm speaking of different firms here, I'm not kind of rolling them all into one. But my experience was, one of the best examples was when I was up for partner. And the firm I was at the time just, was like, well, we want you to apply for partnership. And, was like, well, I'm not really interested. It's never, I didn't even want to be a lawyer. Mm-hmm. So the title just didn't matter to me. I was already doing partner level work. I was working with clients I really enjoyed. I enjoyed my work. I enjoyed the people I was working with. I kind of saw what other people had to do to get that title. And it wasn't worth it to me. The cost benefit analysis for me personally didn't work, because when I go home, my parents have no idea what that means. There's nobody in my world who's going to be, oh my God, you made partner. You're amazing. So it just wasn't a big deal to me. And it was so funny because their first reaction was they were offended. Like, well, what do you mean you don't want to be a partner? Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. I just, it just doesn't really interest me. And so they let it go the first year, and then the second year it became an issue. We really want you to apply for partner. And I said, okay, I'll apply for partnership, but I'm only going to apply one time. And if I don't make it, then it'll just be a mutual understanding that, I said, if I don't make it, we'll still be friends. We can go out for a drink, like, no problem. This isn't personal for me. And they're like, oh, okay, that's great. That's really great. I said, yeah, and I'll accept that as a mutual understanding between me and the firm. This just isn't a good fit. And she said, well, that sounds like an ultimatum. And I said, it's not an ultimatum. I just know what I'm worth.
Pushing me to apply.
I was like,
I'm telling you how I'm reacting to it, and now you're, turning it around.
Yeah, it's like, it's business. I'm pretty sure there's another firm out there that would love a Mexican female patent attorney with a $2 million book of business. Like, I'm not worried. Mm-hmm. So, but I've digressed. But anyhow, so, the treatment in law, in these diversity committees, I think the thing that they never really address is, what does diversity actually mean? It means that I didn't grow up with my mom and my dad going to an office in briefcases and suits. My dad's a printer. I didn't grow up with a lot of people, showing me what corporate America looks like. So the things that motivate me are very different than the things that motivate you. To me, it's a job. It pays really, really well, and I'm super grateful for that. But at the end of the day, it's a paycheck. Mm-hmm. And when I go home, I'm still me, and I'm still a mom. I'm still a daughter. I still, my family is what's most important to me. And, that was really never reflected. And when I tried to bring my values into the firm, those aren't respected.
It seems very much of the cultural divide and how that went into just the, I guess, perception when you were looking at this promotion. Would that be right to say? Just the perception of, I guess, maybe the work-life balance, or what it meant to have this title of partner. And it sounded like just astonishment, thinking you're crazy. You're like, what, you don't want the title? Because you, at the end of the day, your self-perception and your self-worth isn't tied to your work, isn't tied to a title. It's tied to what makes you. You're being a mom, working on the things that you like and that you're passionate about. Would that be right to say?
Yeah, and just, that I was a good lawyer, and I already knew I was a good lawyer. I had clients every day who were very happy with their work. That's what mattered. It didn't matter to me so much, what the title was or what the firm, where they labeled me. And, that really got me what's called, I was labeled as difficult, more than one time, mm-hmm. which I think almost every woman has been.
Difficult, bossy. What are some of the other labels? L'Oreal.
Aggressive.
Yeah. I love that campaign that L'Oreal came out with like years ago, where it was a woman and a man, and they're doing the exact same things, but what the man is referred to as and what the woman is referred to as. Do you remember that campaign?
I don't, but it sounds really good.
I'll have to send it to you, because it's like a 30-40 second clip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it just completely related to every single thing on there. I want to touch on something that you had shared with me, because I think a lot of women would relate to something that you had shared, and an experience that you went through. Actually two. The first one was something you had shared with me about being sent to go see a consultant. I think it was like in Seattle.
Oh, wow.
Because they said you weren't like ambitious enough, or whatever it was that they had said, because knowing you and knowing how amazing you are and how knowledgeable you are, and watching you grow your firm over the last year, I couldn't even connect what they were saying about your characteristics, but it was really just something I think people need to hear, because it's this idea of the perception of this male corporate law firm that's stigmatizing you, but it really has nothing to do with who you are, because actions speak louder than words. Look at what you're doing now. So if you can just share that experience, because to me, my mouth was just like, if someone could see it, my jaw was just wide open. I couldn't even believe what you were telling me. And that was actually happening.
No, so that was actually in connection with partnerships. So, and I mentioned I was labeled as difficult. I felt like they really struggled with understanding me and really didn't ever try,
Mhm.
because I didn't fit in any boxes. And so what it was is I got sent to Seattle to partake in career coaching, maybe it
Mhm.
was called. But really what it was is I called it personality coaching, because what they had me do is they had me take this, it was probably 700 questions.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And there were questions like, do you like driving fast cars? Are you afraid of sharks? I don't know, just, really random
Yeah,
question,
question.
right? It's a personality test.
Mhm.
So I took the test, whatever. I didn't care. And I flew to Seattle. And, I was really offended because, this wasn't something they made every partner do,
Mhm.
or even every employee or every partner candidate. It was something that, I was sort of singled out as needing this career development. So I go up to Seattle and I do the personality test, and I meet with the person, and he comes in. And when he came in, and this is just a lot of who I am, and maybe this is what makes me difficult. Um, I had already realized, there's no way that this person's going to change me in one session. Um, and, and there's probably very little likelihood that I'm going to be changed. But it's in both of our interests to say that both of those things have happened. So so when he came in, I said, look, I told him exactly that. And I said, so we can just not waste any time and just agree that, this is not what that we're not going to be able to accomplish anything, but it's in our best interest to say we have. And he laughed and he said, okay. And he some ways outsmarted me. He said, okay, that's fine, but we're here, and you flew here and I flew here, and so like, you want to go over the test results? I said, yeah, sure. So I go over the test results, and he said that my drive is off the charts. He said, crazy amount of drive. He said, but I have zero ambition. And to him, that didn't make any sense. To me, it sort of makes all the sense, right? My ambition, like, it sort of is tied to passion, right? And I wasn't passionate about that career. That was a job. It was a paycheck. It's always been a paycheck. It wasn't where I was valuing myself. It wasn't, I didn't have these, and it ties into why, when they asked me if I wanted to apply for partnership, I was like, no, I'm good. Like, I already knew who I am. I knew who I was. I still do. I already knew I was a good attorney. It didn't matter what they thought when they put me through whatever hoops they wanted me to jump through. And so to him, it just was shocking. And I explained it to him, and, he listened. And then he said, and the other thing that was really funny that stuck with me is he said, your altruism score is really high for an attorney.
So all attorneys are bad.
Yeah. It was
people who don't care about others.
So it's interesting because, I think it goes back to, I'm just wired differently than corporate America stereotypical attorneys are. And it's one of the things I think when I finally learned to lean into those differences and lean into who I really am and practice law differently. One of the things I say on a lot of things is that I'm disrupting the practice of law, because I'm not practicing law the way big box firms tell you to practice law. I'm still a lawyer. I'm still within all of my ethical confines, and I'm still practicing law, but not according to how a law firm should operate. Things like, we're 100% remote. I've been working remotely since 2008. Every firm has hassled me about it. Every single one gave me grief about it, held me back because of it, used it against me in at least almost, I would say, maybe every review I've had since I've been working remotely. We celebrate it. I have other moms who just so appreciate the ability to work remotely and to be able to pick up their kids from school or go on a field trip, or, that makes them so happy that their work product reflects it. And so it's just like, so it's just really interesting. One of the things that he told me, though, and I really didn't understand this, and this is something that was good that really came out of that, is he said, you are one of the most disarming people I've ever met in my life, which is kind of funny because I figure this guy flies around and meets, a lot of lawyers. And
yeah.
I didn't even know what disarming meant, which I think is part of, I don't have the ego attached that a lot of people do, or a lot of lawyers. And I had to go look up what that meant. And so I pressed him on it, and he said, you would be an amazing business developer. And up until then, my kind of MO had always been that I was the behind the scenes person, right? So there was a male partner who was the figurehead, and he went and met with all the clients, and he did all the things. And I kept all the promises. So, he could promise the world, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. Anything you need, we can do it. And then, he would dial me up and I would make it all happen. And I was very happy doing that. I felt like, I didn't have what it took to be that out front person. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't quick enough. I wasn't, all the things we tell ourselves. So this was a way that I could shine, but just in my own way, where I knew I was getting it all done, and I knew that I was the one who kept all those promises, but there wasn't any like forward facing interaction that I had to do. And so when he said that, I just sort of was thinking, well, no, I could never be a good, because I was picturing, other people I had seen do business development, and they were very smart, and they were very, they were the smartest people in the room type people. They walk in and they can like give advice on the fly. And that just isn't me. And so what he did say is that he said, you're not going to be the one who walks in and, kind of that smartest guy in the room type thing. He said, but you're the one who is going to walk in, find the people that you want to connect with, and connect with them on a much deeper level. And when people want to do business, they want to do business. Yeah, everybody likes the smartest guy in the room, but they want to do business with someone they can connect with. And it took me a couple of years to really let that sink in and really figure that out. But eventually I did. And that is one of the things that I think is also very different about the way that I practice law. I practice law based on connecting with my clients. I tell every client, I am more interested in the relationship that I have with you. And of course, that involves keeping you happy and making sure I'm delivering good work product. But it doesn't involve me having to be the smartest person and understand every single question you ask. It's okay for me to say, I need to look that up. So that was my personality test, but it was really interesting. It was one of the most shocking and a little bit degrading, to have this, I don't think it amounted to what the firm wanted it to be. But it was enough for them to check the box that they had rehabilitated me.
There's so much in what you just said, right? Like there's this idea of this consultant telling you score way too high on altruism to be an attorney, because that's telling and signaling like an attorney has these characteristics and traits and you don't fit them. And that's actually one, in my opinion, one of the best traits a human can have, someone who's a leader can have, but yet not something that was being valued within this context, whatsoever. And then this idea of being disarming compared to everyone else who he had met. But when you look at where you are today and growing your firm, because we met right when you started growing your firm. And I remember you telling me like, oh, I don't know if I made the right decision. And you seemed so nervous about it. And now your firm is just thriving. And I'm just watching everything that you're doing in such awe and hearing about your experiences with these people. Like it just doesn't connect at all. And had they been able to open up, not be so old school with their mentalities and their philosophies of remote work. Well, look at the world now,
right?
Like, their opinions about remote work now and how law firms work, how much more they would have been able to bring into the firm because of your differences, because of your views, because of how you approach things. And it definitely doesn't have to do with, because what was it that high on drive, low on ambition? Was that Was that
Very
it?
yep.
But yet your firm is becoming so well known for everything within cannabis IP, just IP and trademark in general. That to me just doesn't even make any sense. And it's just this idea of what a what a role should be. And because you as an individual, as a woman, as a mother, as a Mexican American don't fit this box, it was, no, you're not right. No, you're not good enough. No, you need to conform to this, rather than, hey, maybe there's something more here for us to look at. But I'm so glad that we got to be able to learn from that experience. That was many years and many microaggressions and details. And you had shared something like you had gone to a sporting event and you came out and all the partners were like peeing in the parking lot. I would have been horrified if I was in that situation. I mean, I don't even know how you handle that as a woman working with your colleagues.
And none of these things, there was another instance where when I, because I think it's good to talk about like what are the things that I felt were microaggressions, because maybe people don't, one of the first was that when I very early on in my career, there was something with an assistant who was unhappy with me. And, it's sort of like a game of telephone, right? So she tells an assistant who tells another assistant who tells her attorney, and her attorney is, one of the biggest rainmakers. So he calls a meeting. The meeting is the CEO of the firm, a board member.
Oh my God.
My partner, so 3 males and me. I get called into a meeting. Again, this is to talk about like an assistant who's unhappy with maybe how I'm giving her direction, but this is where we start, right? There's been no like HR involvement. There's been no like having somebody come talk to me about nothing. This is step one. So I get called into a boardroom to talk about this. And the CEO starts with this paternalistic, like, here at this firm, we do not slam doors or yell at people or blah, blah. And he's going on and on and on about all the things we don't do here at this firm. And so, I'm just mostly tuning it out because I'm just like, okay, this doesn't apply to me. Mm-hmm. But my business partner, he kind of chimes in. He says, I'm really confused by this. Like, what is this about?
Yeah.
And the board member says, oh, that's because this doesn't have anything to do with you. This is about Sheila. And my first thought is like, it doesn't have anything to do with him. Why is he here? Mm-hmm. Is it just because you need another man in the room? Or are you telling my dad? Like,
right.
Tell me why this person's here. So then I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, let's talk. So he pulls out this like crumpled up napkin from his pocket where he's listed some things. He's like, well, we've received complaints that you're, doing all of these things. I said, slamming doors. I said, okay, well, did you ask the partner right next door if she's ever heard a door slam?
Right.
No. Okay, I sit 2 doors down from reception. Have you asked her if you ever heard me yell? No. Okay, so you did nothing. This is step one. We're right here, and I'm being accused by like the CEO of the firm.
With a board member
firm. That we're not talking about a baby firm, like, right? So, like, so this, and so we have a really tense conversation, and I stood up for myself, and I said, I've done none of these things, absolutely not one of them, and in fact, here's what's going on, and I tell him the real story. And the board member says, well, I would have fucking fired her. And I said, well, that's because you're a white male. Like, I can't do that.
Right. Because I get called into this for things I haven't done.
And do you know, it took like 3 months after that meeting for me to have her fired? But he would have fucking fired her. Oh God. Like, mm-hmm. Okay. But it was just, it was amazing. And it was, and it was funny because toward the end, because I didn't yell. And I told him that. I said, you know what? I said, I've never been more upset in my professional career at all. Never once than I am right now. I said, I have not raised my voice with you once. And he just sort of looked at me. And one of the things that I remember him saying is by the end of it, he said, well, it sounds like you don't trust me. And I said, I don't. And I never will. Man. I'm like, why are we talking about trust now? Like, you know, like, now your feelings are hurt that you called me into this ridiculous meeting. That was how we started out the relationship. So then, later on that year, another IP partner, he had become the IP chair. So it was a big deal. He was very well respected, right? And he and I were friends. When I would go out to Ohio, we would, have lunch together or whatever. He's a nice guy. I'm friends with him to this day. When he gave notice, the CEO of the firm called me on a Saturday. I was on vacation with my kids, called me and said, I don't know if you've heard, but so-and-so is leaving the firm. And I said, oh, I hadn't heard that. And he said, well, I understand that you and this person have a special friendship, but that's not a reason for him to have to leave the firm. What exactly are you insinuating?
Exactly. What did you say?
Oh, I was furious. I was just like, excuse me?
Right.
Because we've had lunch together. Right. Now we're sleeping together.
Right. The optics for women and the things that we have to think about on a daily basis. Like, I have a general rule for that exact reason. I do not have business dinners with people. And in many ways that has, in some regards, made it more difficult to close business or to have, but the situations that arise from that have been just negative for me, whether it's business-wise, personally, whatever. So the optics, okay, lunch, and who cares even if you went to have dinner? You're eating a meal. Who cares if you were having drinks at the bar at 12 o'clock, because that's what people do to close business. But because you're a woman.
And the only woman, so am I supposed to eat by myself?
Right.
Because if I eat with the staff, you'll tell me I'm not supposed to eat with the staff.
Wow.
Because I've had that conversation before.
So you can't sit with your colleagues and have a meal. You can't sit with the staff because you're too elevated in your career. Is that was the idea that
I don't know.
Don't eat with the help.
Right.
What is this, the 1910?
Yeah, no, it's insane.
Wow. So what did you do? How did that what was it? I'm like, why was he telling you this?
He was telling me because they were hoping that I would convince him to stay and let him know that it was okay, that we had this special friendship and that he could still stay at the firm.
Gross.
Yeah. So like, these are the sorts of like ongoing, so there wasn't any like, I wasn't being abused. I wasn't being sexually assaulted. So I didn't have the like, the huge fact pattern that a jury would eat up. But I had these like ongoing, that was like, those both happened in the same year, and then it didn't stop. You mentioned the football game, and we get there and they all, two of the male partners in the car just jump out and start peeing right there in the parking lot. I was like, okay. And part of why they didn't know
must have had a special friendship with them.
Right. And part of why they didn't know how to behave around women is because no woman had ever gone to a sporting event. We were at a firm retreat when that happened. It was the biggest talk of the whole firm retreat that, oh my God, Sheila went to the football game with these male partners. Like, and the only reason I went is because one of the junior attorney who was actually invited got too drunk and couldn't make it. So in the middle of the night gives me his ticket. And I was like, heck yeah, I love sports. I'm going to go. But this was like such a like, and I remember in one of the women's women's initiative committees, they were like, well, the men exclude us. And I was just like thinking, what are we doing? You're kidding. Right. Men are, what do you mean? I'm like, well, they have their sporting events and their golfing events. And I was just like, you could go to those. At the time, I didn't realize like, no, actually the women didn't go to those things. I was,
You didn't see the doors closed to you. You're just, no. I like sports. I'm going to go. Like, what?
I was just like, this will be cool. Let's go. Yeah. And, huge deal, but And then just, I was being left off of emails. There were emails. The office that I worked in was very small. There were maybe 5 or 6 attorneys there. They would have emails about hiring decisions or new recruits, and I wasn't on them. Or they had emails about, IP events. So we're going to host this IP event in Seattle, and I wasn't on the emails. And I kept bringing it up. Why am I being and every time you're reading between the lines too much. You're being too sensitive. No, I'm not. I'm being excluded.
Mm-hmm. That's insane. And all of those things are independently significant, but when you add them up, like, it's just a huge wave of things that you had to overcome. And all you're doing is servicing your clients and making them happy, making things happen at the end of the day. And you're still having to deal with all of these things. I want to actually take a moment and shift gears just a little bit, because I think it's perfect time, because you're sharing these different scenarios, to actually get into a little game that we have, using your experience, having gone through these scenarios, so we can learn a little bit more from you. So the game we're going to play is a game of situation and instinct. And basically, there is no right or wrong answer. There's just a 3-minute clock that determines whether you win the game or not. And so it's just getting through these 3 scenarios that I'll provide you, and just telling us how you would handle each one within 3 minutes. And if you beat the clock, then you win the game and reach your PayDestiny. And I have no doubt that you're going to share some really amazing things just based on everything that you have been through and already shared with us. Any questions on how the game works?
So do I have 3 minutes per or 3 minutes total?
3 minutes total. And I will do my best to read these in a very clear way for you.
All right.
So let me set the clock for you. All right. So we've got 3 minutes. I'm going to hit start and we will go. So 3, 2, 1. Scenario 1. You have been with your company for 1.5 years and exceeding every expectation. Someone was just hired with the same job description. You find out that they're paid 10% more than you. What do you do?
It's funny because it's happened. So, I think I would definitely approach. I would probably start with I believe in the hierarchy. So starting with kind of the first person in line above me. So I'd probably go to my, the partner above me or my supervising partner and say, hey, I just found out this, and probably ask for advice and counsel on the best way to handle it. But I would move up the food chain definitely and address it.
Got it. So scenario 2, your boss gets promoted. They are part of the team to decide who will replace them. Your coworker, who has less experience and often misses deadlines, but frequently spends time socially outside of work with your boss, is invited to apply for the promotion. You are not. What do you do?
If I wanted the promotion, so, because there's some things, and this goes back to the discussion we had about partnership. There's some things where I probably would let it go. But if it was something that I wanted, I would definitely let my boss know that I'm also interested in the position and what can I do to apply and be considered for it. Just straightforward.
Straightforward. Love it. Okay, scenario 3. You work on a team of all men and your company is acquired. The new leadership is also all men. Your boss says they need to restructure their department to fit the new management style. This restructuring includes demoting you, but you get to keep your salary because you've been doing a great job. No one else is demoted. What do you do?
Yikes. So I'm the only one demoted. Again, and maybe the constant theme here is just communication. And I think that's one of the things that people in my law firms in the past have found most difficult about me is I will speak up. I will say. And so I think I would want to know, I would want an explanation, at least one that made sense to me. And if I didn't get one that made sense to me, I would definitely have that discussion.
Awesome. And you have 35 seconds left.
I won.
You won. And we got some really amazing insights and advice to those situations. And unfortunately, I think the first situation is something that happens much more frequently than we would hope. So hopefully if anyone listening comes across that situation, they'll be able to pull some insights on how they can best handle it. I think a lot of times people just, the emotions start rumbling up, and that can actually hinder a positive outcome. So these types of things are going to be so great for people to be able to refer to. So thank you for playing a game and reaching your pay destiny with more than half a minute left. Before we wrap up, I just have a few more questions, and want to pull out some of your do's and don'ts to get a promotion and get a pay raise. So anyone listening, what would you say your top 3 do's and don'ts are to take that next step in a career?
Right. So we'll go back to one of the first things I said. I think for success in any job, you really do need to take on an employer and slash owner mentality. What I mean by that is, a lot of people are there just to punch the clock, do what they're asked, punch the clock again, and go home. But if you think about it yourself as the business owner, or the employer, what are the things that your employer would really want to see, or what are the things that can make your employer's life as useful as easy as possible. It's one of the things that I think, in my current position, my assistant has just exceeded. She really does function. There's nothing that, well, this isn't in my job, or this isn't my job description. Just totally willing to go above and beyond, and to make sure that, whatever the end goal is, whether it's the client happy, or the report gets out, or the research gets done, the product gets made, that, you're taking all the steps that you can to make sure that that happens. So I think having an employer mentality is probably my number one. And that sort of will lead to the other things, which would be always over deliver. And I think women, it's hard to say that, because I think women just naturally do that. And so then to put more pressure to over deliver is probably not the right thing. So it's definitely not a like drive yourself into the ground, because I have a friend who does that. But definitely, make sure that your work product shines. And it's simple things like, I've never turned in an assignment that wasn't spell checked and read through and made sure the spacing after every period, and call it controlling the things that I know how to control, right? I don't know if what I wrote is what the partner wants to see, but there are things I know that I can get right. And so I try to get right all the things I know I can, and make sure those are perfect. And the rest of it, I just do my best. So I would say number 2 would be, always control for the things that you can control. And 3, is the question succeeding or asking for a raise?
It can be interpreted anyways. It's getting to that end result.
Getting to the end result.
So
yeah.
It can be either the immediate moment, or it can be leading up to getting that promotion, pay raise.
Yeah. And I think the other would be communicating. And so, and it's something you mentioned, you really need to learn how to communicate, not just with the right words, but at the right time. And by that, I just mean making sure that your emotions aren't controlling. There's a lot of times, especially in employment, where you just, can get incredibly frustrated or feel really upset about something. But, ask yourself why you're triggered, really try to figure out what it is so that you can communicate that effectively. I think communicating honestly and effectively is key to, handling those difficult situations, asking for that raise, asking, fixing one of the wrongs, in the exercise that we did, fixing any of those situations. Definitely being able to communicate is one of the keys. And in terms of the don'ts, without making them just the reverse.
Right.
I would say, because I want to have some meaningful ones here, definitely don't let your emotions control your actions. I think would definitely be number 1. And don't lose sight of the big picture. I think that's something that when you're really striving to get to a goal, or whether that's a raise or a promotion, you can really lose sight of what's really important to you. I think staying true to yourself and honoring your values and honoring the bigger picture really helps. One of the things that I did when I was most frustrated in my career was I started following cancer patient accounts because I wanted to stay connected to the work I was doing in cancer immunology, because I had lost that connection because I was so frustrated with my job. And so, don't lose that connection to your why and to why you're doing this. And my third don't would be, don't unnecessarily escalate things. And I talked a little bit about the hierarchy. I think, if you end up ruffling too many feathers by escalating things unnecessarily, you can get a lot further by, going to your immediate supervisor. The other thing is like asking people, get people invested in you. So when you ask somebody like, how should I handle this situation? They're then invested as your advocate of that situation, because, I now gave you advice. Like, well, I think you should. So if you go do those things, I feel like, well, that's what I told her to do and it didn't work out, So I think by getting people invested, asking for advice and getting that sort of feedback, rather than going straight to HR or straight to, the CEO, I think you'll really pick up some advocates along the way who will help you.
What do you do though if you ask someone for advice and their advice is part of this older school mentality? And I'm asking this because there is a big article that came out maybe about 3 months ago about a woman in tech at Google. And she was being harassed by someone that she very much admired. And the person she turned to for advice said something along the lines of, people in straw houses shouldn't light matches. And that was the advice she got from the person that she thought would be her advocate. So if you know that you're in a place where something just isn't right, but you're really trying to pay attention to that hierarchy, how would you advise someone in that situation?
I think at that point, it's, that's your cue to go to the next step. Like you can go to the next chain of command, because, not everybody, and this is something that I've had to learn, not everybody can handle every situation, right? So that person who said that probably genuinely doesn't know how to handle that situation. And, so I think at that point, having already checked that box, I've asked you, that person can't now be upset that I went over her head and asked my next person or talked to the next person, right? I asked for her advice. She didn't give me advice, that was feasible, because in my opinion, working in a toxic environment is untenable. And I say that from experience. And also what I didn't realize, and I'm digressing here a little bit, but I think it's important. I didn't have our settlement negotiations until 2 years after I left that firm.
Oh, wow.
So for 2 years, I couldn't talk about it with anyone. And I basically just bottled it up and shoved it down. What really shocked me was how much that was affecting me. After those settlement negotiations, the things that I felt in my body, the release, the reliving, that's when you realize how much something is affecting you. So it wasn't just affecting me like, oh, this makes me angry at work. It was affecting my confidence. It was affecting my, ability to put out good work product. It was affecting me in that I was procrastinating on things. It was affecting me, all of that stuff. There's such a big toll that it takes on you mentally. It's exhausting, and you don't realize it until you're all the way out of it. And I didn't even realize, I didn't fully appreciate. I knew it was affecting me. I was getting help. I got some life coaching to help me get through that period of time. But it wasn't until after I was free of it that I really saw how much it affected me. So I say that to say that I don't recommend that anybody stay in a toxic environment. I realize we have to for periods of time, but realize also what it's doing to you. And some of that is long-term damage. And so, if you in that situation that you described, you go to a supervisor and they tell you, keep quiet, that's the wrong answer. And so when you get advice that is definitely not the right answer, then you need to continue up the hierarchy until you get somebody who's going to help you with the situation or address it in some way.
Got it. Well, thank you for your do's and don'ts. We'll make sure to make them very clear for everyone who wants to be able to refer back to them and what you said. I have one last question for you, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask, is because this is something that I often ask myself. Knowing what I know now and everything that I've been through, looking at myself on my first day at my first professional job, what is the one piece of advice I would give myself? And the only one, but like that one piece where it's like, I wish I would have known this. What would that be for you?
I wish I would have known that I was enough.
Mm, yeah, that's so powerful and so simple.
Yeah.
Um, wow. And so
Yeah.
that's,
I think when we get most off track is when we stop trusting ourselves and
yeah,
we start doubting ourselves and we start, um,
comparing.
yep.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think that is probably the number one thing that derails people.
So if people want to follow your work, how would they be able to do that? Is it Twitter? Is it LinkedIn? What's the best way for people to get in contact?
So I have all of the things, but I am most active on Instagram. I haven't been active recently because I've been growing and going through all the growing pains.
Yeah.
But as you know, like you mentioned, we're hiring and we're getting fully staffed, and I'll be turning back to that. So I put out a lot of content on Instagram. I also put out, if you're interested in sort of legal content, IP content, cannabis content, on my website, www.aura.ip.law, AURA, IP as an intellectual property law.com. My Instagram is Sheila R. Gibson, SHEILA R. Gibson. But that's where I'm putting out most of the things. And I try to keep my Instagram updated with sort of things I'm up to, speaking events, things of that nature. And then I'll also be, what I'm working on next that I'm really excited about is I want to bridge the gap for entrepreneurs in particular between startup. I'm using my savings to do this.
Yeah.
And now I'm funded and able to afford legal work. So one of the things I'm building is some DIY courses and workshops and worksheets to help entrepreneurs. And so I'll definitely be announcing that sort of thing on my Instagram.
I can't wait for that to come out. So definitely follow Sheila on Instagram. From time to time, I know that you put together workshops and webinars. I was fortunate enough to attend a webinar that Sheila had on copyright and trademarks. And I will say, I'm not just going to say this because she's my friend and I am one of just in awe of her, basically. But the way she explains the materials for copyright and trademarks and this IP law are so simple. And the examples she gives, because it can be very complex, very convoluted. These are very hyper niche professions, and she makes it so simple to understand. So follow her on Instagram so that way if she has something coming up that is relatable to something that you might need or just interested in general, and you can attend that event that she might have coming up soon. Sheila, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Do you have any other final words of wisdom or things that you want to share?
No, I think we shared a lot, and I just want to thank you for this. I wish I had a podcast like this to listen to when I was going through all the things. I'm really happy to see you doing this, and I hope it's helpful, at least my portion. I know yours will be.
Oh my gosh, so helpful and so many insights and things that we can't wait just to get together and make very clear for everyone. So thank you, Sheila, so much for being on this episode of the PayDestiny podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the PayDestiny podcast. Make sure to head over to PayDestiny.com and enter your email to get notifications for every future episode of the PayDestiny podcast. There, you can also create your free account to access tools that'll help you get a promotion, get a pay raise, and reach your career goals. I'm Adriana Herrera, your PayDestiny podcast host and founder of PayDestiny. Thank you for being with us today, and I look forward to having you back here for another episode of the PayDestiny podcast. Until then, be well and take care.